The countdown is on. 69 more days to the presidential parliamentary elections 2020 in December. Is Ghana ready for a third force? Can we move away from the NPP and DC? I guess that's a very huge question. Our guests joining us via Zoom, Paa Kow Ackon is General Secretary of the PPP, also Paul Osei-Kufuor, Senior Programs Manager with the CDD. Good morning, gentlemen, if you can hear me.
Good morning, Mama V, and good morning to your viewers.
Great.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Paa Kow, let me ask you, the PPP, how's the PPP doing? What's the latest with your campaign?
Thank you so much, Mama V, for having, let me say that as a party, we are busily working on the ground. We recently outdoed our presidential candidate, and yesterday the National Committee agreed on the date for the launch of the manifesto and the running mate. It is the pleasure of the National Committee that the manifesto and the running mate should be outdoed and launched respectively on 10th of October 2020. And so that will be done. But prior to that, our presidential candidate is on the ground, busily campaigning, speaking to people on one-on-one basis. So basically, that is what we are doing. Our parliamentary candidates across the country are equally doing so. And we are hopeful that 2020 election will pull a lot of surprises.
You know, there are those who have said that you should rather concentrate on getting members of parliament, representatives of the party in parliament, and move away from the presidential race because it seemed to be between the NDC and the NPP.
Well, in a democracy, people are free to express themselves, but we don't share in that theory. If you look at what is happening in Ghana today, not too long ago, I think somewhere in May, Ghana Web conducted a survey. And if you look at the survey, about over 60% of the people said they were tired with the NPP and the NDC and they wanted something new. And so we in the PPP believe that considering what has happened over the years, the fact that the NPP, the promise they made that they were going to turn Ghana into a better nation, and the fact that they have not been able to deliver on many of their promises, particularly on the promise of fighting corruption. We think and believe that the NPP has shown that it is not different from the NDC. And so if you have such a political challenge, obviously there will be the need to have something new. And that something new is what we in the PPP believe that we represent that something new. And now, you can't do just parliamentary and forget about the presidential. Quite often people forget that it is a presidential candidate who leads in the campaign. And so if you focus on just the parliamentary seats, what happens to the presidential? You are in politics to effect change. And so and the presidency, looking at what we have in Ghana, where the president has executive powers, you cannot go into an election and focus on the parliamentary and leave out the presidential. We believe that both must work hand in hand. And so we can't just focus on parliamentary. The presidential is equally important. And so that is what our focus and concentration is. We are looking at both presidential, parliamentary. Those who did the survey did not say the smaller parties should focus on only the parliamentary. They said they need a third force. And so you cannot be a third force when your focus is only on the parliamentary. The presidential is equally important. We have a system where if a party wins power, then it grabs everything. The winner takes all majoritarian system, which has failed. You know, it has failed us. And so if anybody should suggest that I mean, party like PPP should forget about presidential and focus on parliamentary. It is neither here nor there.
Okay.
Both are important. And even in so-called two-party states like the US, where you would ordinarily think that the focus will be on just the Democrats and the Republicans. In the US, in this 2020 election, 4 presidential candidates are contesting in the election. The Greens and then the Libertarian people. They are all contesting for the same slot. Why is anybody not saying that in the US, which is a known duopoly, the other party should forget about the presidential and focus on the Senate or the governor?
Mr. Sekufo,
it's not the way to go. Ours is a multi-party democracy where everybody must be represented, not only at the parliamentary level, but
okay. Let me go to Mr. Sekufo.
Presidential as well.
Yeah, sure. I'll come back to you, Paa Kow. Just stay with me. Mr. Sekufo, when some Ghanaians say, oh, we're tired of the NPP and the NDC, they are the same, even though they're not. When we say that, are we shifting focus? Are we really going to bring in a third force? Are we mindful of the other parties?
Good morning once again, Mama V, and good morning to your viewers. I think the conversation is about also the relevance of, and good morning, Paa Kow Ackon, my co-panelist on this discussion. The conversation is basically about the relevance of having a multi-party system. And the relevance of having a multi-party system is uncontested, but in a democracy, citizens expect to have a number of choices. They are looking for representation, and they want to have a situation where they have a number of choices to also select from. In the same vein, citizens will want to hear more about how political parties are going to solve their problems. So there is a contestation of ideas. So you can't, when you limit the participation to just 2 parties that's having a duopoly, you reduce the choice and opportunities in terms of representation, in terms of selection of parties by citizens. You limit these opportunities that citizens can have. But with regards to whether there is a need for a third party, I think as I've explained, certainly there is a need for a third party, but whether Ghana is ready is also a different conversation that we must have. Because if you look at our current situation, the smaller parties are quite fragmented. And over the years, they've not been able to garner the needed vote to really create the necessary effect on our electoral outcomes. So the issue of fragmentation is quite critical. And then if these smaller parties will create a potential, strong potential, then they must demonstrate some kind of new ideology, in the sense that if you look at the 2 main political parties, the NPP and the NDC, one center-right, center-left, it used to be the CPP, which was moving more towards the people, more socialist ideas, social protection schemes, and interventions. But you see the NDC has over time taken that pole. So the 2 parties, one strongly from the center to the right and the other center to the left. So the ideology debate must also define the emergence of any.
Okay, Mr. Sekufo,
to the election landscape. So these are some of the things, because you see, one thing is also that the bigger parties have also formed strong coalitions. There are strong ethno-regional coalitions that the MPP and the NDC has built over time. And that has constricted the space for the participation of these smaller parties. So I think the smaller parties have to rebrand and really demonstrate that they are coming on board with some new ideas that really solve some of the systemic, long-term structural challenges that we face as a country.
Okay, so let me go back to my earlier question. Do we even pay attention to them? Because often you'd find that they actually have very new ideas. except that we're not open to them, so we don't even hear it. Even when they say it, we block our ears to it.
Yeah, it's also about how they brand this kind of ideas, how they communicate, and how they build networks among new and emerging constituencies, like the youth. The youth forms a very critical mass. So how they connect with the various electoral constituencies, the local, the elite, the middle class. And I think one constituency that they can begin to leverage on, though they are strength on, is also the middle class. Because if you look at the two main parties, the MPP, the NDC, it appears regional strongholds. And for most of the elections, they've not performed below 40%. So it tells you that they have a strong constituency already. So those swing who determines elections, the smaller parties can decide to use that as an attraction to begin to build some kind of attraction, some kind of interest among these kind of elites and those who and the areas that, especially in the central region, where we've seen that their voting patterns have always swung between the MPP and NDC. They've not always been a stronghold of any of the parties yet. It changes. So that is where the parties, they must build they must build networks, they must strengthen their linkages and develop new constituencies. And also, as I said, it's about the branding of what they want to do. If the NDC are promising the same thing, I think they can introduce new tangents or new dimensions to the conversation. I think, for example, with Okada, we've not heard much from the other smaller parties about their proposal in resolving the issues around Okada. I think their voices must also be heard in this political conversation.
It's good you raised that. Let's just bounce it off Paa Kow. Paa Kow, Mr. Sekufo raises the issue of the alternatives, what your own policies are. The popular ones that we've heard, what are yours?
Hello, Mama V.
Yes, Paa Kow, hopefully you heard the question.
It appears I lost you. So,
okay, but there's been issues raised about branding. There's been issues about branding, targeting, even constituencies, targeting your messages to fit certain groups, looking at the swing areas, places where you can benefit from.
Okay, I think that a party formed in 2012, I mean, fairly a young party like the PPP, we have demonstrated sufficiently that we are forced to reckon with. In the last two elections we participated, we emerged as a third force, and we need to put the issue in perspective. You know, we are dealing with two main parties that have had the opportunity to be in government. And as I said, the winner takes all ideology or the winner takes all policy we have accepted in Ghana is not also allowing the smaller parties to thrive. And so Mr. Osei Kufuor spoke about parties like our party not branding ourselves that much to attract voters. I totally disagree. You know, we do the best we can. In terms of ideology, I mean, or in terms of policies, the PPP in 2012, 2016, we put forward many new ideas. For example, we're the first party to even talk about free education for children from kindergarten all the way to senior high school. And we did the best. We did the best within our means to send that message across. But obviously, because the media is also controlled by politicians, if a message is not coming from their party, definitely they are not going to
so
give
that's a comment that I would totally disagree with you on. If you say the media is controlled by politicians, what do you mean?
Oh, I mean a chunk of the media is controlled by politicians, owned by politicians. Let me put it in that right place. owned by politicians. And so if you have a media house which is owned by, let's say, NPP or NDC, and PPP has a policy that they find good enough to attract voters, definitely that policy may not travel that much. And in 2016, I can give you the example of the free education thing. It came from the PPP in 2012. The election of MMDCs has always been a PPP idea, and
so let's fast forward. Let's fast forward.
Get the necessary media coverage. The opposition takes the idea, they run with it, and then suddenly it becomes theirs.
Okay, Paa Kow, let's stay with 2020. He mentioned the issue of the Okada, for instance, and we haven't heard your own policies, what your alternatives are on these popular promises that we've heard from the two parties.
You know, the Okada issue, for example, we give a broader policy direction. The Okada matter is an issue of unemployment. And we have said that given the opportunity, we will create jobs for people. If the people are able to access good job opportunities, or they're able to get jobs to do, they wouldn't be interested. In fact, only a smaller number will be interested in getting into the Okada business. It's also an issue of having proper transportation system. As I keep saying, for example, if traveling from Kaswa, if I know that I'm traveling from Kaswa to Accra Central, it will take me 10 minutes with a proper transportation system in place. Why will I risk sitting on an Okada? So these are the issues. We have a broader understanding of the issue, and we think that providing systemic solutions to the problem is what will solve the problem. The Okada matter is an issue of jobs and an issue of waiting time in terms of transportation. And so if you have a proper transportation system in place, train system, bus system, and so on, many people who would use the Okada because they think it is fast and convenient for them will now move on to move away from the Okada and then use the public transport system. The other issue too is about jobs. If you have provided enough jobs for these people, they will not use the Okada. So it's not about legalizing Okada or not legalizing. That is not the issue. Let's solve the issue from a systemic point. But the Okada too has become a business for some people. So if you regulate it, the better it will be for all of us. So whether you like it or not, some people will definitely use the Okada as their means of transportation or as a means of livelihood. And so the issue has to be looked at from a broader perspective. We are not interested in just promising for the sake of promising because we want some vote from people. We must provide solutions that will be lasting enough for all of us. But if we are unable to do so, and then just on at the spur of the moment, people are just talking and promising here and there, we will not make any progress. And that is the problem we have in this country. We are not able to provide lasting solutions to problems. We are only interested in saying things that the voter will be interested in, getting their votes, and when we win power, then we all go back to sleep.
Mr. Sekufo, what's the importance of them having alternatives necessarily to the promises that we've heard from the NDC and the NPP?
Yes, but before I go to the relevance of them having alternatives, you see, I'm not saying the smaller parties are not up to the task part of them as such. I really understand the resource constraints that they face, the logistical constraints that they face. And they are also working with, they are within a space where we have political parties that can trace their lineage or to independence, like the MPP, and then we have the NDC, which has been on the political landscape since '92. So if you really want to match these political parties, you must also define what your outcomes or performance indicators will be. Certainly, you may not be able to win the elections. It may be difficult as you are evolving and in these formative years of establishment. But some of the smaller parties also have been with us for and that's why I made the issue about their voice being within political and public discourse as a relevant tool or as a relevant game changer to the conversation, because we will continue to see your presence by what you demonstrate you'll be able to do when critical national issues come on board, and even post-elections when the debates are ongoing about critical national issues that evolve over time during political conversations, or current issue about corruption and those. We must consider the smaller party must have a way to continue to join that debate. And what the question you asked me about why is it relevant to that, it ties into why it is relevant, why we must hear their voice, why we must hear the alternative from them. Because democracy is about providing representation and also using the representation to give democratic dividends to citizens. So you've not been elected, you are not the representatives of the people, but how do you contribute to the process of using democracy as a tool to enhance the livelihood of citizens? So there's a lot of conversation going on within the media. There's a lot of conversation going on both social, traditional media, where we must see the smaller parties contributing to such conversation and such discussions. And that is how citizens will also remember them and be able to assess their performance based on that participation, the participation that they provide within that context space. I want to touch on the issue of what can be done to enhance these smaller parties. And Paa Kow made mention of the issue of the winner takes all politics. And you recall recently, government made efforts to introduce a multi-party system at the local level. And we are still of the opinion that the introduction of the multi-party system will have provided an opportunity, or will have provided some kind of a means test for the smaller political parties to participate effectively using the local governance system. And then citizens can begin to assess their performance. Because if you look at some of the CPP has very strong holds in Zima area. The PNC, I think in Upper West or so, some of them have some smaller constituencies that if you are able to do reforms, they will be able to use to prepare themselves, build their capacity, and engage with the citizens. As it stands now, there are also challenges and constraints in terms of having opportunities and windows for participation, because our local governance system doesn't provide first past the post or any electoral mechanisms for smaller parties to compete. And they are challenged currently at the national level, also crowding out because of political campaign financings, which the cost to our politics has become such huge that political parties are being crowded out. They are not able to raise the needed revenue and resources also to contest. So these two issues will be quite critical to give space to our smaller political parties and also enable them to participate effectively within the democratic system.
Well, I thank you very much, Mr. Oseiku, for the recommendations. Paa Kow, just the final one, and I look forward to the day when people say they're tired of the NPP and the NDC, they begin to actually vote for parties such as the PPP. Just to finish up the conversation with you, what's the lineup for today or the rest of the days in the week for the PPP?
Okay, so on Friday, our presidential candidate will visit his hometown, they in the Afajato district or constituency, and we will go with her. And then let me make a final point, Mama V. I think that an important issue we are not discussing in Ghana is the proportional representation. So you have a party like the PPP going into election, gaining over 100,000 votes, and we are not represented anywhere. And so perhaps the media.
When you say you're not represented when you say you're not represented anywhere, where exactly are you hoping that you would have been represented?
We are not represented Yes, if we're practicing the proportional representation system, 100,000 votes would have given us not less than 5 seats in parliament.
Okay,
in
so
South Africa, they are doing it. In many places, they are doing it. So that if you are not able to win the presidential, at least you know that you will be represented in parliament to promote your ideology, to promote your policies, and so on and so forth.
Okay,
so I think it's a discussion that we should all be interested in, particularly the CDD.
Okay, it draws us back to the winner takes all issue that we were discussing a while ago, but this is definitely an angle that we will spend a bit more time on. But I thank you very much for your time as well. Paa Kow Ackon is with the PPP. We had Mr. Paul Osei-Kuffour, Senior Programs Manager with the CDD, on Voters' Voice today. Voters' Voice is back on Thursday, God willing. Right now, though, as we close the chapter on the election,